Hello, my dear friends. Welcome back to Books and More, your quiet corner for reflection. Here, we carefully distill the core messages of significant books, helping you absorb their true value without the weight of time pressing down on you. In the relentless rhythm of our daily lives, it is often difficult to pause and truly see the world, or even ourselves, with clarity. We crave understanding and a mindful presence amidst the noise. Today, we invite you to explore a thought-provoking work by George Soros titled Open Society: Reforming Global Capitalism. This is far more than a financial text. It is a deep philosophical inquiry into how our imperfect perceptions shape the reality we live in. It challenges us to look beyond the market to the human heart of our global community. I ask you to consider this. Does the pursuit of self-interest truly serve the common good? And how can admitting that we might be wrong actually be the key to making things right? As we walk through these pages, know that you are not alone in your questions or your uncertainties. Embracing our shared imperfections is often where true connection begins. I hope this journey brings you a sense of calm and a fresh perspective. Take a deep breath, relax, and let us begin this exploration together. Introduction. This book represents a form of practical philosophy. It provides a conceptual framework that has guided me not only in my financial success, but also in my philanthropic efforts to foster open societies around the world. Through my network of foundations, I have seen firsthand the struggle to establish democracy and the rule of law in countries transitioning from communism or dictatorship. These experiences have reinforced my belief that we urgently need principles to guide a global open society. We are currently living in a global economy characterized by free trade and the free movement of capital. However, our political arrangements remain firmly rooted in the sovereignty of the state. This mismatch between an international economy and national politics is the central challenge we face today. We often assume that capitalism and democracy are inextricably linked, but this is a false assumption. History shows us that repressive regimes can thrive economically while denying freedom to their citizens. Capitalism is excellent at creating wealth, but it is not designed to ensure justice, liberty, or the common good. I am deeply concerned by the rise of what I call market fundamentalism. This is the widespread belief that the public interest is best served when individuals are allowed to pursue their own self-interest without restriction. This idea is seductive but dangerous. Markets are amoral. They are meant to facilitate exchange, not to look after social values like peace, environmental protection, or human rights. Furthermore, financial markets are inherently unstable. They do not tend toward a perfect equilibrium, but are prone to chaotic boom and bust cycles that can devastate nations. To address these dangers, I propose an alliance of democratic nations. The goal of this alliance would be to foster the development of open societies within individual countries and to strengthen international law. This requires a shift in how powerful nations, particularly the United States, behave. We cannot simply impose our will unilaterally. A true open society is based on the recognition that our understanding of the world is inherently imperfect. We do not possess the ultimate truth. Therefore, we must create institutions that allow for the peaceful correction of our mistakes. I must acknowledge my own fallibility in this regard. In my previous work, I predicted that the global financial crisis of the late 90s would lead to a system-wide collapse. I was wrong about the outcome, largely because I underestimated the ability of financial authorities to keep the center stable while the periphery suffered. However, the structural flaws in the global capitalist system remain. By admitting our lack of perfection and rejecting the dogmas of both totalitarianism and market fundamentalism, we can strive for a society that remains open to improvement. Thinking reality and the flaws of economics. The concept of an open society rests on a very simple yet profound admission that our understanding of the world is inherently imperfect. If we acknowledge that we can never hold the ultimate truth, we realize that we must create a society that allows for different views and constant improvement. This philosophy begins with the relationship between our thinking and the reality we live in. We often assume that our minds passively observe the world, like a mirror reflecting an image, but the truth is far more complex. We are not just observers, we are participants. When we participate in a situation, our thinking affects the outcome. I call this two-way connection reflexivity. It works like a feedback loop. We try to understand the world to make decisions, but our decisions then shape the world we are trying to understand. Since our understanding is always incomplete and often biased, our actions introduce an element of uncertainty into the course of events. This means that in human affairs, unlike in the movement of planets, the future is not determined by timeless laws. It is shaped by our misconceptions and our fallible attempts to improve our condition. This philosophy brings me to a crucial distinction between natural sciences and social sciences. In nature, facts exist independently of what we think about them. The laws of gravity work whether we understand them or not. This independence allows scientists to test theories and establish reliable knowledge. But in human society, our theories actually change the facts. If people believe the market will go up, they buy, and the market goes up. This creates a short circuit between thinking and reality. It means that social theories act more like alchemy than physics. They can change the lead of society into gold or into dust, not because they are scientifically true, but because people believe in them and act upon them. I have adopted what I call radical fallibility as a working hypothesis. It suggests that all human constructs are flawed. This sounds pessimistic, but it is actually liberating. If everything we build is imperfect, then everything can be improved. This is the foundation of the open society. It stands in contrast to closed societies, which claim to possess the ultimate truth and impose it by force. History is not a predetermined path, but a process of trial and error. We make decisions based on fertile fallacies, ideas that might be wrong but produce results for a while until their flaws are exposed and we must change course. This philosophical framework forces me to be deeply critical of modern economic theory. Economics has tried too hard to imitate the certainty of Newtonian physics. To make their mathematical models work, economists rely on the concept of equilibrium. They assume that supply and demand are independent forces that naturally find a balance point. They assume that participants act on rational expectations and perfect information. My experience in financial markets tells me this is simply not true. Financial markets are not constantly seeking equilibrium. They are prone to excess. They are characterized by boom and bust cycles that are driven by the biases of the participants. Prices do not just passively reflect the underlying value of assets. Instead, prices affect those values. If a company has a high stock price, it can borrow money cheaply and grow, which in turn justifies the high price. This is reflexivity in action. It creates a dynamic disequilibrium, not a static balance. By ignoring this, mainstream economics has built a theoretical house of cards that fails to explain the real world of financial instability. The danger arises when these flawed economic theories are elevated into a political ideology. I call this market fundamentalism. Just as communism tried to abolish the market mechanism to serve a collective truth, market fundamentalism tries to abolish collective decision-making in favor of market values. It argues that the common interest is best served when everyone pursues their own self-interest. This is a seductive idea, but it is false. Markets are amoral. They are designed to facilitate exchange, not to uphold social values. They do not distinguish between right and wrong, only between profitable and unprofitable. If we allow market values to dominate all aspects of life, we lose our moral compass. Markets can tell us the price of everything, but the value of nothing. They cannot provide for public goods like justice, honesty, and stability. These require deliberate political choices and a moral sense that goes beyond the bottom line. We must recognize that while the market is a brilliant mechanism for creating wealth, it is not capable of governing a society. We need politics, and we need a recognition of the common good. We are social animals, not just isolated economic units. Our sense of right and wrong, our traditions, and our social cohesion are vital for our survival. When we treat labor, land, and money merely as commodities to be traded, we undermine the social fabric. Therefore, we find ourselves in a world where global capitalism has triumphed, but it is an incomplete and distorted form of an open society. We have unleashed the dynamic power of markets, but we have neglected the political and social institutions needed to keep them stable and just. We rely on a false belief in equilibrium and the perfection of markets, ignoring the reality of reflexivity and human fallibility. To move forward, we must abandon the arrogance of certainty. We must accept that our economic models are flawed and that our social values cannot be priced in dollars. Only by embracing our fallibility can we hope to build a global society that is not just efficient, but also open, just, and humane. Reflexivity in finance and the course of history. I have made a rather bold claim that economic theory has fundamentally misrepresented how markets operate. To understand the world, and specifically the financial markets where I made my fortune, we must abandon the idea that markets are rational or that they always tend toward equilibrium. The prevailing wisdom suggests that financial markets passively reflect the underlying economic fundamentals, much like a mirror. I argue the opposite is true. Markets are active. They do not merely reflect reality, they help shape it. This two-way connection between our thinking and the situation we are thinking about is what I call reflexivity. In the financial world, we act on imperfect understanding. We try to predict the future, but the future depends on our decisions today. Because we cannot know everything, we introduce a bias into our decisions. This bias influences prices, and those prices, in turn, influence the so-called fundamentals. When this feedback loop becomes self-reinforcing, we get a boom-bust cycle. It starts when a prevailing trend and a prevailing bias reinforce each other. Prices rise, confidence grows, and the fundamentals actually improve briefly because of the influx of capital and confidence. But eventually, the gap between perception and reality becomes too wide to sustain. The illusion shatters, and the process reverses itself just as violently. I saw this clearly in the conglomerate boom of the 1960s, where companies used high stock prices to buy growth only to collapse when the music stopped. We saw it again in the recent internet boom. These are not anomalies, they are the nature of the beast. Markets are always in a state of flux, rarely in equilibrium. This concept of reflexivity extends far beyond the stock exchange. It is the driving force of history itself. Just as in finance, participants in history act on imperfect knowledge. We are not merely observers of history, we are its creators. Our misunderstood ideas shape events, and those events reshape our ideas. It is a constant dialectic, a shoelace pattern where one side is reality and the other is our interpretation of it. They are tied together, but they never quite match. I apply this framework to understand the rise and fall of the Soviet Union. The Soviet system was an attempt to fix history, to impose a rigid dogma upon reality. I call this static disequilibrium. The dogma was far removed from the actual lives of the people, but the system used force to bridge the gap. It was a closed society. It refused to acknowledge change or correct its errors. Eventually, the divergence between the dogma and reality became unsustainable. When the system finally attempted to reform, it could not handle the pressure. It did not transition smoothly, it collapsed into chaos. This is dynamic disequilibrium. This analysis leads me to distinguish between three states of history. Much like water can be found as liquid, ice, or steam. There is the normal state of near equilibrium, where our perceptions and reality are close enough to allow for gradual correction. This is the hallmark of an open society. Then there is the frozen state of a closed society, where error is entrenched by force. Finally, there is the chaotic state, where events move so fast that our understanding cannot keep up, leading to a breakdown. In studying these patterns, I realized that the models of natural science do not fit human affairs. Atoms do not have opinions. People do. Our values and our biases matter. In a closed society, the state dictates values. In a chaotic revolutionary period, values break down entirely. But in an open society, we accept that we might be wrong. We allow for trial and error. We understand that perfection is unattainable, so we settle for the second best option, which is a society that remains open to improvement. This philosophical stance is not just an abstract theory for me. It guided my actions as a fund manager, helping me recognize when a trend was unsustainable, and it guides my philanthropy today as I work to foster open societies in a world that is often hostile to them. We must recognize that our understanding is inherently flawed, and upon that humility, we can build a more stable and free world. Part 1. The Open Society Ideal and the Problem of Social Values. If my argument that we suffer from a deficiency of Part 1. The Open Society Ideal and the Problem of Social Values. If my argument that we suffer from a deficiency of shared social values is correct, then the greatest challenge of our time is to establish a set of fundamental values that applies to a global society. I propose the concept of the open society as the ideal that our global society should aspire to. This might sound like a utopian project, especially since many people are not even aware of the concept, but it is grounded in reality. The open society is based on the recognition that our understanding is inherently imperfect. Since a perfect society is beyond our reach, we must content ourselves with the second best, which is an imperfect society that holds itself open to improvement. When I look at the current state of the world, I see that the promotion of market principles has gone too far. Market fundamentalism, the belief that the common good is best served by uninhibited pursuit of self-interest, has become a dominant and dangerous ideology. It creates a distortion. Unlike communism, which was the opposite of an open society, market fundamentalism is a distortion of it. It exaggerates the value of the market mechanism and ignores the need for non-market institutions to protect the common interest. To build a global open society, we need shared values. In the past, the Enlightenment tried to base universal values on reason, imagining a detached, rational individual. But this individual does not exist. I suggest we replace this with the concept of the encumbered individual, a person whose thinking is influenced by their social environment and who is not endowed with perfect knowledge. We need to base our universal values on our shared fallibility and our mutual dependence. We need a global society to support the global economy, but this does not mean a global state. It means an alliance of democratic nations, fostering the development of open societies and establishing international law. This brings me to the difficult relationship between market values and social values. The problem is not establishing that there is a difference between them, but in deciding when we should be guided by one and when by the other. Market fundamentalists try to abolish social values by arguing that they are expressed in market behavior. I know from my own experience that this is false. As an anonymous participant in financial markets, I never had to weigh the social consequences of my actions. I played by the rules and tried to maximize my profit. The market is amoral. It allows people to act without moral considerations as long as they follow the law. This amorality is exactly what makes markets efficient, but it also means markets cannot be trusted to look after the common good. The danger arises when market values penetrate into areas where they do not belong, such as politics, law, medicine, and education. We are moving toward a transactional society, where relationships are replaced by transactions. This erodes social values and loosens moral constraints. If the profit motive is allowed to dominate the political arena, society is deprived of its moral anchor. I propose a crucial distinction to solve this dilemma. We must separate our role as market participants from our role as political participants. As market participants, we are entitled to pursue our self-interest. But as citizens and rule-makers, we must be guided by the public interest. The profit motive that guides us in business is not appropriate for making the laws that govern business. When these two roles are confused, when political influence is bought and sold, the system becomes corrupted. We cannot rely on the market to correct these moral and political failures, because the market is not designed to care about justice or stability. We must recognize that while markets are indispensable for individual freedom and wealth creation, they are not sufficient to hold a society together. We need to deliberately cultivate social values and collective decision-making mechanisms to ensure that our global society remains human and open. The crisis of global capitalism and the tragedy of Russia. As I examine the architecture of our modern world, I am struck by a profound distortion. The global capitalist system we have constructed is in many ways a warped version of the open society I champion. We have allowed the values of the marketplace to penetrate areas of life where they do not belong, elevating the pursuit of profit above all other considerations. We have built a unified global economy where capital flows freely across borders, yet our political and social institutions remain stubbornly tethered to the nation-state. This disconnect is the root of the instability that plagues us. The system acts like a giant circulatory pump, sucking capital into the financial center, primarily the United States and Europe, and pushing it out to the periphery. When the circulation is robust, the periphery prospers. But capital is fickle. It flees at the first sign of trouble, leaving developing nations to face ruin while the center remains largely insulated. This asymmetry is not just an economic quirk. It is a fundamental flaw that makes the playing field dangerously uneven. This instability revealed itself with brutal clarity during the financial crises that began in Thailand in 1997. I watched as the markets, rather than acting as a rational pendulum swinging toward equilibrium, behaved like a wrecking ball. The crisis was not merely the result of corrupt Asian values or crony capitalism, as some Western observers smugly claimed. It was a failure of the international financial system itself. The flawed currency pegs in Asia encouraged reckless borrowing, but it was the international lenders who fueled this boom. When the bust inevitably arrived, the response from the international authorities, particularly the International Monetary Fund, was deeply misguided. They applied a medicine designed for the public sector to a disease rooted in the private sector. By raising interest rates and enforcing austerity, they pushed economies into deep recession. Worse, their intervention protected the foreign lenders, shielding them from the consequences of their bad risks, while the populations of the debtor nations bore the full brunt of the pain. This created a moral hazard, teaching international banks that they could lend without fear. It was only when the contagion threatened the center itself, through the near collapse of long-term capital management, that the double standard became undeniable. The Federal Reserve intervened to rescue the U.S. markets, preventing the meltdown that had decimated the periphery. I must admit that in my previous analyses of these events, I underestimated the resilience of the American consumer and the responsiveness of the Fed. I predicted a global collapse that did not materialize in the center, though for those in Indonesia, Thailand, or Brazil, the devastation was all too real. However, the most tragic casualty of this era was Russia. The collapse of the Soviet Empire offered a historic opportunity to transform a closed society into an open one, yet the Western democracies failed to rise to the occasion. We treated Russia as a financial problem to be managed, rather than a political transformation to be nurtured. We sent economic experts who preached market fundamentalism, ignoring the fact that a functioning market requires the rule of law and strong institutions. The result was not a transition to a legitimate market economy, but a descent into robber capitalism. A chaotic privatization process allowed a handful of oligarchs to seize the state's most valuable assets for a pittance, while the government failed to perform its most basic duties, such as collecting taxes or paying wages. The system became characterized by a monstrous, incestuous relationship between business and politics. I was deeply involved in trying to support Russian reform through my foundations, and I witnessed the unraveling firsthand. By 1998, the situation had become untenable. The government was financing itself through short-term debt that it could not possibly repay. I attempted to intervene, advocating for a modest currency board supported by Western aid to stabilize the ruble, but the political will in the West simply did not exist. The subsequent default and devaluation were catastrophic. It was not just a financial failure, it was a psychological blow that destroyed the Russian people's faith in Western democracy and market reform.
We effectively lost Russia. The devastation of the middle class and the humiliation of the state created a vacuum that demanded a strong hand, leading away from the ideals of an open society and toward a new form of authoritarianism. This failure rests heavily on the conscience of the West. We allowed the logic of the market to dictate our foreign policy, forgetting that markets are amoral and cannot provide the values necessary to sustain a free society. If we continue to rely solely on the mechanism of the market to solve political and social problems, we will only perpetuate this cycle of instability and lost opportunities.
Building a new architecture for a global open society. The global financial crisis of the late 90s has now passed into history, yet I remain convinced that the system responsible for it remains fundamentally unstable. We have created a global economy where capital moves freely, but we have failed to build the political and social institutions necessary to keep it from tearing societies apart. The conventional wisdom suggests that financial markets tend toward equilibrium, and that the crisis was merely a hiccup caused by corrupt practices in developing nations. I strongly disagree. The architecture of global capitalism is lopsided. It favors the center, the rich, capital-exporting countries, while punishing the periphery. If we do not address these structural defects, we risk a backlash that could destroy the benefits of global trade. My proposal for a new financial architecture is modest but essential. We must reform the International Monetary Fund so that it acts less like a stern schoolmaster and more like a true lender of last resort. Currently, the system protects lenders while imposing harsh austerity on borrowers. This creates a moral hazard where banks lend recklessly, knowing they will be bailed out, while ordinary citizens in debtor nations suffer the consequences. I suggest a system where countries that follow sound policies are pre-qualified for assistance. This would act as a preventative measure, stopping panics before they begin. By offering these credit lines, we can lower the cost of capital for developing nations and level the playing field. Furthermore, the World Bank should shift its focus from lending to giving grants, concentrating on poverty reduction, education, and legal reform, the building blocks of an open society. However, fixing the financial plumbing is not enough. We face a glaring discrepancy between our sophisticated economic cooperation and our chaotic political disarray. We lack a global political architecture to match our global economy. The United Nations, constrained by the sovereignty of its member states and the veto power within the Security Council, has failed to maintain peace or protect human rights effectively. We saw this failure tragically unfold in the Balkans. The disintegration of Yugoslavia and the carnage in Bosnia and Kosovo demonstrated that without a proactive, united front of democratic nations, we are powerless to stop atrocities. The intervention in Kosovo, while necessary, was a reactive measure that came too late. We must shift our focus from crisis management to crisis prevention. This brings me to my central political proposal, the creation of an Open Society Alliance. This would be a coalition of democratic nations working together to promote the principles of open society both within their own borders and internationally. This alliance would not replace the United Nations, but would work to strengthen it, acting as a caucus to push for more effective international laws and standards. The alliance would have two main objectives. First, it would foster the development of open societies in individual countries. We must recognize that democracy cannot be imposed from the outside, but it can be nurtured. We should use a combination of incentives, such as access to markets and financial aid, and political pressure to encourage governments to respect the rule of law and human rights. The Stability Pact for Southeastern Europe serves as a model for this regional approach, offering the prospect of European integration as a powerful incentive for reform. Second, the alliance would establish and enforce international codes of conduct. We need rules that govern how states treat their citizens and how they interact with each other. This includes enforcing labor standards and environmental protections so that the global market does not become a race to the bottom. It also means establishing a functioning international judiciary to hold tyrants accountable. The leadership for this alliance must come from the United States and Europe. Unfortunately, the United States is currently suffering from a crisis of identity. We are the world's sole superpower, yet we are reluctant to accept the responsibilities that come with that power. We oscillate between isolationism and unilateralism, often refusing to abide by the very international rules we seek to impose on others. This arrogance undermines our legitimacy. To lead the world toward an open society, the United States must stop acting as a solitary sheriff and start acting as a partner in a community of nations.
Ultimately, this transformation requires a shift in our own values. We have allowed market values to penetrate into areas of life where they do not belong. We must distinguish between our role as market participants, where we legitimately pursue self-interest and profit, and our role as citizens, where we must uphold the public good. The market is amoral. It cannot distinguish between right and wrong. Society, however, must be moral. We cannot rely on the invisible hand to solve problems of social justice or political stability. I realize these proposals may sound ambitious, perhaps even utopian to some. When I look at the hurdles, the entrenched interests, the political inertia, the seductive simplicity of market fundamentalism, I feel a mix of anxiety and hope. Yet I also look at what we have achieved in the past. We have built open societies that, while imperfect, offer the best form of social organization humanity has yet devised. The task now is to extend those principles to the global stage. We need to create a global society that reflects not just our economic interests, but our moral aspirations. It is a project that requires the active engagement of civil society to push governments toward this vision. It is, I believe, the only way to ensure a future that is not only prosperous, but also just and free.